everybody. Nice to see you, and I'm privileged to be here. Thank you for your nice start to the morning, a thought-provoking start to the morning. I've already made a technical error. There we go. I was invited to put into context of Reykjavik Arts Festival the question of whether the arts have borders. And this was both more of a challenge than I thought, but it also came quite naturally once I sort of got into the thinking of it. So yes, I did take over the Reykjavik Arts Festival 2 years ago only. I've only done one edition this summer because it's a biennial festival. And I will tell you a little bit about the festival. And then some of the initiatives that we created to maybe shift the power game a little bit in Icelandic culture. First, I would like to tell you a little bit about my country. Do you know where Iceland is on a map? Most of you do. It's there, right in the middle between America and Europe, and it's actually it actually sits on top of where the tectonic plates meet. So this makes this a volcanic island. It keeps shaking in more ways than one, and we're the weather is quite fierce, strong winds, but the climate is temperate, because we have the Gulf Stream coming from South America, so it's not as cold as here, but it's a little bit more dramatic, let's say. There are 350,000 people that live in Iceland. 350,000. We are just over 1/3 of a million, so there are very few of us. We speak our own language, Icelandic, og ef þið vilja heyra hvernig íslenska hljómar, þá hljómar hún svona, gamalt tungumál frá því fyrir 1000 árum síðan. This is the way Icelandic sounds. It is related to Norwegian, Swedish and Danish, so we share a root, and actually our language is like the old version of the language. So we are still able to read literature from 1,000 years ago without any help. We are really connected historically through our language to our roots. Whereas in Sweden, Denmark and Norway, the languages have been influenced more by other languages, so they speak a more advanced or more developed, I don't know, but ours is closer to the roots, so both is good. Reykjavik Arts Festival, and I would really like to tell you a little bit more about context, because it's super important. The country was a poor country for centuries. The Vikings came there back in 1000, or before the year 1000, year 800 something, from Norway and Ireland to settle there. And we had like prosperous times in Viking times, and then we were basically poor throughout the Middle Ages. We lived in like mud huts, and into the 20th century actually there was not much happening in Iceland. It was not until after the Second World War that the country became prosperous. The Reykjavik Arts Festival was established in 1970, and one of the initiators was Vladimir Ashkenazy, the famous pianist and conductor, who was living in Iceland. He was married to an Icelandic woman. He was conducting the Icelandic Symphony Orchestra, which had been running for 10 years by that time, and there was nothing happening in Reykjavik, basically. So he and a gentleman who was running the newly founded Nordic House, which is like a cultural house in Reykjavik, they both came from somewhere else and felt that there was nothing happening, and they wanted something more for this little growing city. And they founded and they got support from the Artists Union and the city and state to found Reykjavik Arts Festival. And this is the logo of the festival that you can see, the yellow logo, and it's been the same from the beginning. So And so it's established in 1970. The first festival was held in 1970, and this is a photo from one of the events, and this is actually Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin performed in a sports hall in Reykjavik in 1970 as part of the first Reykjavik Arts Festival. This was like at the height of their career as well. They were like they were the most popular band in the world at that time. So this was huge. And Jacqueline Dupré played at the first festival as well. She had actually stopped playing officially because she was already affected by her illness by then, but she decided to come to play in Reykjavik. So there was like, we've had, and from that first year, we've had some of the major names in classical music, in visual art, theatre, from around the world in Iceland. It was, so yes, it's funded still by city and state. It's a multidisciplinary festival. It's international and local. It balances the two, and it's biennial, as I said before. So when I took over 2 years ago, the situation was so that the festival was facing not exactly a crisis, but maybe like an identity crisis, because the situation had changed a lot in the city. Now there are 70 festivals in Reykjavik each year. Not all arts festivals, they're like, well, that's counting all the food festivals and everything. We have a huge concert hall that really hosts events that were only at the arts festival before, are now happening every month, every week in Reykjavik. So the whole the climate has changed. The cultural life of the country has changed a lot since 1970. And there were voices of people who were saying the festival has become for a select few, it's not for us anymore, there is so much else on offer, why do we do this festival anymore? So that was the situation when I entered, I was asked to ask those questions. And I decided to be really brave and to really dare to hear the answers. So we went into work about creating like a new vision for the festival and a strategic plan. And we gathered together basically everyone from Icelandic culture, all the major institutions, all the major artists' associations, to discuss what should we do with this festival, and ask the question, do we need it still? And much to my delight, I felt that there was harmony with the responses to my gut feeling, which was there has never been more need for a festival like this in Reykjavik than exactly now. And the reason, because this is public money, this is a space which brings together and connects all the major institutions, and connects the public with the institutions. It doesn't have a particular space. It collaborates with all the spaces in the city, and it's where we can make change happen basically, and shift the dialogue and shift the power systems, because we have a very tiny overhead, but we have some money, and so we can sort of our playing field is everywhere. So I won't go into the strategic plan. It's very interesting, but I won't go into it in detail. But one of the key phrases from our vision is that the arts and culture are not to be reserved for the privileged few, but are a right for all. And we decided to put this into words, just to say it. So we have to then really take this on board every day in our work and say, we're not doing this just for the people who normally come to cultural events. We're doing this for everybody. And this shifts where our financial resources goes, this shifts where our focus goes, it shifts how we produce our promotional material. It changes everything in the way we think about the programmation and our image. And the pictures you see are all from Reykjavik Arts Festival. They're all parts of the program for last year, for this year actually. So back to the borders question. We definitely, the arts definitely have borders. That's my short answer. We're defined by geographical borders. Iceland, for example, is very far away from everywhere. It's really hard to get to, and it's expensive to bring international work to Iceland. But there are challenges with that. Language, it does create a border, especially with arts that are dependent on language, like theatre. So, for example, the Icelandic theatre scene has long been, it's a very strong scene, but it's quite isolated because nobody speaks the language we speak. But technology is solving this partly for us. There are financial borders for all of us, but this has not least to do with, I've been fortunate to travel around the world quite a lot to other continents to meet and work with artists in other continents. And the reason we can't collaborate and do more with African artists or South American artists is very often financial. So there are borders there in the way we collaborate. It's also about the audience, that the audience, not all audiences can afford to go to certain types of events because they cost too much. There are cultural borders, well, that's linked to tradition very often. There are political borders and religious borders, and the list goes on. We have lots of borders, but I'll come back to it. So in our programmation, I didn't want to talk about the strategic plan, but I'm just going to take a couple of examples of how we tried. This is baby steps still for us. We're really underdeveloped, I think, in many ways. But how we tried to shift the way we think about where we do art, who it's for, and by whom. And the first question was where. And we decided to take the festival into the suburbs of Reykjavik more than ever before, because most of all of the cultural institutions, more or less, are in the center of the city. And this is very often the case, of course. So we took, for example, this is a dance project that was created in this apartment block. There are Alexander Roberts and Ásrún Magnúsdóttir, two artists who decided to do a dance party inside an apartment block and collaborate with the people who live there. And this is crucially, this is in the most multicultural and most maybe financially diverse or economically diverse neighborhood in Reykjavik. Called Asparfell, this apartment, and they tried to get all the 300, they visited each apartment many times, and they wrote letters, and they made phone calls, but they only got 7 flats involved out of the, I don't know how many, 300 I think or something. But it was a magical day where people, this guy for example, he decided to invite people for dance lessons in his home. And this is his father. They live together. He makes dentures. He has like a little workshop in his home where he creates dentures. It's called dentures, fake teeth, basically. And this lady who was sitting in the back of her, she decided to do playlists and tell stories from her life. So she invited us for something to drink and to discuss with her, listen to her music, and she shared her life story alongside it. It was beautiful. We did events in a swimming pool with an underwater concert, so you had like floating equipment and you heard music from underwater. Swimming pools, crucially, are very important in Iceland. There are cafes. We don't go to the bar and cafes to socialize, we go to the swimming pools. They're really important to us. They're warm. And we went into a neighborhood that's really goes under the radar, but is really remarkable, and did like site-specific theatre in this neighborhood. I don't think the Arts Festival has ever done anything in this neighborhood. It's called yeah, it doesn't matter. You don't really know anyway. And public space, of course. This is the festival has been doing this a lot through the years. So events in public spaces where you surprise people in a public space, and these dinosaurs came all the way from Holland to play with us. And we went to the hillside where you could enter like a hike, a tour, which had like a little meditation within it. but then you went to listen to a radio play, basically, inside a yurt, one of those tents, Siberian tents, in different parts of the country. So if you were a good hiker, then you could go to all 4 around the country, in the highlands. And this is, so let's go to the who. So who is performing at the festival? Who is represented? Who's there, showing us something, performing something? And this is Daniel Lismore. He's an eccentric dresser. This is the way he dresses very often, like daily. You meet him in the street like this. He comes from the UK, but works a lot in New York also. He crosses boundaries on so many levels. He's not been in festivals like this before. He's done exhibitions before, but he hasn't been at this type of platform before. He has a very interesting approach. It's like gender bender. Also, so he exhibited his costumes that he had actually worn himself. He takes Alexander McQueen pieces, like really expensive designer pieces, and just cuts them up and glues them back together and puts a piece of plastic on them or something. So he's absolutely playing with like symbols of wealth, and not afraid to just do whatever with them. That's from the opening of his exhibition. So these are the costumes, and this invited into the space people that were maybe not used to coming. And grassroots level artists, this is a piece or part of a piece. It was actually an exhibition of photographs, where young women were juxtaposed against symbols, men power dressed in portraits. And then she did this performance that happened right in the center of the city. General public took part in a big intervention, like 200 people, where they dressed up as people from 100 years ago, which is the year we gained our sovereignty from Denmark. And this is so it was important. We engaged all sorts of just people, regular people, Reykjavik people of today, who went into the steps of people from Reykjavik in 1918. And it made such nice contrast. This was like a whole day of pop-up things, but they were in silence the whole time, like ghosts from the past. And then we had Bill Murray, so it's like all in and we had Galen Lee from the US also, a very different type of artist. But these sort of contrast and juxtapositions are what really, I think, was one of the strengths of this year's festival for us. For whom we did a big family program, which was then turned out to be, of course, not just for the kids, but it's for the parents. This is a Canadian company, Corpus, you know them maybe as Transhumans, wonderful, wonderful piece. And this is the most important part, and I don't want to skip this. I think it's a lot about creating new spaces as well, not just going into the spaces where people are, but also creating a new space which doesn't have a history, which doesn't have connotations or baggage. So we created a festival hub where we welcomed all sorts of events, an evening with deaf entertainment, Arabian dance party, all sorts of things, and it was. I think we are on there, and it's informal and relaxed. And it's changing the way people see the festival, I think. But this is going to take time. This is going to take some years, I think, to really change and have a permanent effect. And this is my last image. And the most important. Does anyone know what this is? This is a picture of something... Sorry? It's a wormhole. Yeah. And it's basically a theoretical concept from science. Which is based on a theory of relativity and is calculated from the theory of relativity. And scientists say this should exist. This probably exists. We haven't seen it. We haven't proved it, but it probably exists. And it's basically where there's a possibility that out in space, all around us. Maybe they're like the size of the tip of a pin, but or maybe they're vast, they're huge. There's a very strong possibility that there are these holes which bend, where time and space bend together, and you can travel through. And you can, if you fit into one of those holes, you can be whooshed away into the other part of the universe in a second, or back 1,000,000 years, or ahead 1,000,000 years. And this is actually, the scientists really believe that this is possible. But what they need to be told is that we already have these wormholes. It's the arts. We bend space and time. We are able to imagine ourselves 1,000,000 years ahead. We're able to travel within us. We carry this power. So even if we have the borders, the arts also carry within them the power to break those borders. And it's our obligation, the people who have the power, like me now, and the money and the platforms, to really utilize the arts for the benefits of society. That's my final word on this. Thank you very much.